She had been working alone again, the hum of soldering irons and blinking LEDs her only companions in an empty lab at midnight. On a worn wooden desk lay her creation, a small, spider-like robot with 8 delicate legs and a heart of circuit, boards and wires. Its curious sensors glowed softly. She pressed her sweaty forehead to the cool desk, exhausted but hopeful. That's when the door swung open, bright light spilling in, and the CEO walked in. He stood frozen, stared at her creation, then burst out laughing. The mocking echoed around her. At that moment, every dream she'd ever had seemed to shatter. Her name was Aisha Tariq, a Pakistani-American engineer in robotic AI at Zenith Robotics, an ambitious tech startup chasing big breakthroughs. Aisha wasn't polished like the other engineers. She was intense, they said. Weird. She worked best in building tiny biomechanical creatures she called microbots, hoping one day they could explore dangerous places humans never could. She believed in them like a parent believes in a child, but nobody else did. When Ethan Cole, the CEO, finally regained his composure, he shook his head and chuckled. "This is cute," he said condescendingly. "But if you want to succeed, here, Aisha, you need to build real robots, real products, not toys." He turned off the light and left her alone in the shadows again, the circuits betraying no emotion. Aisha stared at her microbot until the lab door closed. She felt the world collapse. She dropped to the floor, surrounded by loose wires and plastic legs, and whispered, "It's not a toy." But with nobody to hear her, it felt like she'd lost her voice. She gathered the parts, slipped them into a box, and left the lab. All she could think was, maybe he's right. Everyone else believed in bigger, faster, more brutal robots for military or industrial use. Microbots felt like art. But in a company chasing investment rounds and boardroom presentations, art was a liability. The next morning, Aisha trudged into work wearing not cause and effect hoodie but her home clothes. She avoided the break room, used a side entrance, and didn't speak to anyone. The whispers began right away. "She's late." Did the CEO call her out? She pretended she didn't hear them. But inside, a spark refused to die. That evening, she walked into the lab determined. She took the box of parts, unpacked them, and began again. She worked with trembling hands, tearing up when thin circuit traces broke, then smiling with triumph when they healed. The microbot came alive under her fingers once more. She programmed it to crawl in a line, pause, wave a sensor leg, then scuttle to safety. It was simple, but to her, it was a miracle. Aisha's nights became sacred. After dark, no one came by. The lab was hers. Little by little, she improved her design, added cameras, better motors, AI learning chips. The microbots began working together, forming chains, passing messages, cooperating to climb over obstacles. She taught them, in code and circuit, how to communicate. Meanwhile, at Zenith, bigger projects were churning. A hulking industrial robot that could weld cars, a cargo delivery drone, and AI software that predicted market trends. But CEO Ethan sensed something missing. The press releases felt sterile. The excitement felt flat. Zenith Robotics was strong, but not surprising. They built expected things. With stiff competition in the market, they needed a breakthrough. Something unexpected. One afternoon, Ethan was reviewing metrics in the executive suite. At the ping of an email, he paused. Subject: Midnight Microbots, Dashboard Stats. Intrigued, he clicked. Data streamed in. Mysterious spikes in camera feeds, tiny robot test footage, algorithm logs tagged by Aisha. He realized she hadn't abandoned her midnight project. She had doubled the bots, proven cooperation between 5 units in obstacle courses. He forwarded it to the board. Interesting. What is this? He called Aisha into his office. Heart pounding, she entered. The room was cold, sterile. Ethan sat, steepled fingers. He clicked on a screen. Clips played of the microbots. In action, climbing steps, linking legs, sharing sensor data. He looked at her, quiet. "Explain," she inhaled sharply. She told him the vision, swarms of microbots exploring collapsed buildings after earthquakes, crawling through nuclear reactors to inspect damage, delivering medicine in small doses to remote areas. She described their intelligence, tiny scale, communication, resilience in numbers. She spoke with trembling passion, but only when she began to describe the applications did she feel seen. Ethan listened, softly, in silence, for a long time. Then he leaned back. "You're asking to turn Zenith into a mosquito lab," he said. But his voice wasn't mocking. It was curious. "Tell me, what do you need?" The board heard about it. Investors were skeptical at first. A robot swarm, no bigger than a walnut? Where's the ROI? But then Zenith released a demo video, showing infiltration into pipes, relaying thermal data from a burned-out furnace. They showed bots delivering mini first aid during fire drills. The world took notice. Press coverage emerged. Zenith's microbot swarms could save lives. Ethan faced pressure. Should Zenith pivot? Should they stick to predictable, profitable products, or chase this wild microbot dream? In tense boardroom meetings, numbers were thrown. Logic clashed with vision. Some board members wanted assurance, ROI forecasts, endless focus groups. Aisha came to one meeting late, unseen. She analyzed toxic gas filtration algorithms. She spoke silently, eyes bloodshot. When Ethan stood and said, "I propose 40% of R&D shift to her project," murmurs erupted. Aisha didn't ask for approval. She just extended her hands. She showed simulation data, storm-ravaged city blocks, microbots mapping underground voids inaccessible to drones. She showed thermal scans of survivors trapped in rubble. She argued for direct humanitarian focus. She asked for pilot funding. Funding low compared to Zenith's revenue, sufficient to build 1,000 units and test in the real world. The CEO stood up, palms pressed to table. "I've seen her work. I've seen the potential. And I trust her." Silence filled the room. The vote passed by one voice. His Aisha vanished into the lab. Weeks turned to months. She oversaw a team of engineers, some who once mocked her, others who never knew anything else. They built, rebuilt, adapted. They tested microbots in broken pipelines of an abandoned factory. They calibrated sensors to detect trace amounts of water. They coaxed tiny units to memorize spatial maps and share data with larger drones. They iterated at midnight again, but now in teams. Her leadership style was quiet, supportive, encouraging, human. She stayed until everyone was gone, then worked later than the rest. She gave encouraging words at 3 a.m. coffee runs. She posted hand-drawn diagrams on sticky notes to show complexity without intimidation. As they prepared for field trials after a devastating hurricane in a Caribbean nation, the world watched. Aisha stood by Ethan in a makeshift command center. She calibrated swarm patterns as 2,000 bots were dispatched through broken walls and flooded roads. The live feed shook. Bots found people trapped in flood-drowned attics. One family was rescued. Because of their sonar signal relay, panic turned to stunned awe on reporters' desks. "Zenith's microbots saved lives today," the headline screamed. On live national news, Ethan spoke. He thanked the engineers. Then he turned to Aisha. Standing with her team, she blinked in the glare of TV cameras. He said, "Without her vision, we would have built another big machine and missed this chance to innovate." She not only saved lives, she redefined what Zenith is capable of. Today, I'm announcing her as our incoming Chief Technology Officer, and I'm asking her to lead the next phase of this company. The lab erupted with applause. Investors cheered. Reporters lined up. Aisha's heart pounded. She remembered Midnight Lab. She remembered the mocking laugh. And she remembered her Father's words. They don't see yet. One day they will. Now, her father stood at the back of the command center, zooming in on screen, his face gray but proud. In the weeks that followed, Aisha accepted the CTO role. She assembled a new innovation wing, more microbot projects funded, more engineers hired, and more applications deployed. From pipeline inspection on Mars-like desert plains to surgical bots performing precise tasks in remote clinics. Zenith's stock doubled, but more importantly, their purpose renewed. Aisha remained humble but confident. She never forgot what it felt like to be laughed at midnight. She instituted midnight lab hours, where any engineer could bring any project, no matter how odd. She greeted them at the door, offered coffee, mentorship, and a place to be themselves. The culture shifted. Top-down control became bottom-up invention. Profit followed innovation, not the other way around. The first anniversary of the Hurricane field trial, Aisha stood in the same lab where she'd first fought for belief. She walked past rows of microbot prototypes, past sketches of world-changing ideas. She placed a small microbot on the desk and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me." The microbot glowed and blinked back. The startup that dismissed her late-night idea had risen to global impact because it learned to listen. Aisha had risen and made sure no idea was too small, no engineer too quiet, and no midnight project too weird. As cameras circled outside, she stepped out onto the stage for Zenith's annual demo night. Massive spotlights glittered off polished steel robots behind her, but she walked to the front alone. She held a microbot in her hand. She cleared her throat. Thousands of employees, investors, media watched. She paused, then said, "This little thing was mocked, laughed at, called